Your first hire and every hire you make after that will redefine your culture.
And now, it's time once again for the show that gives glorious voice to 25 million business owners across the fruited plain. Radio Free Enterprise with Frank Fielkow.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you, Dude Walker. Yes, indeed. I am Frank Fielkow. Welcome back to Radio Free Enterprise. On today's show, we're going to do something completely different. I have two guests joining me to talk about one topic, and that topic is attracting, retaining, and developing top talent into your business. My first guest is a first-time entrepreneur, Curtis Marshall, the owner of DC Rentals, a small but rapidly growing residential property management firm based out of Alexandria, Virginia. Curtis, welcome to the program.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Happy to be here.
My other guest is a veteran entrepreneur. Brian Fielkow is president of Jetco Delivery in Houston, Texas, and the author of Driving to Perfection, Achieving Business Excellence by Creating a Vibrant Culture. Brian Fielkow, welcome back to Radio Free Enterprise.
Thank you, Frank. It's great to be back. I really appreciate it.
I want to describe to our listeners what it is we're going to be talking about. Several months ago, I had the opportunity to interview Brian about this topic of his book of creating a culture and the impact that it can have on the bottom line of every business. And it seemed like as we were going along over and over again, the topic came back to attracting and keeping the right people in your business. It says people create the culture. And of course, management is the fifth M of the six M's of the M cube that I write about. And I recently had the opportunity to talk with Curtis Marshall about a challenge that he's currently facing that faces every entrepreneur when they first start out in business, which is bringing on that first employee. And then by extension, what you learn through that process is going to help you to bring on your entire team and build that team going forward. And it just struck me that here we have, or I have the acquaintance of Brian Fielkow, a veteran entrepreneur, recruiter for his businesses, cheerleader for his businesses, management expert. And at the other end, I have this relationship with Curtis Marshall. And I thought, I bet Brian could really help Curtis out. So as you're listening to this program, whatever number of employees you have from 0 to 100, I hope that you'll try to put yourself in Curtis's shoes right now and think about what it's like when you're making that decision to hire on your first person. We're going to ask Curtis to speak to the challenges he's facing right now, and then try to integrate in Brian's experience into it, and I think we'll all get a lot out of it. Curtis, I'd like to start with you. If you would, describe the problem that you're facing. Particularly what I have in mind is what you told me about how your business has grown so rapidly and is expanding at the point where you simply can no longer be that one-man band. You're going to have to start bringing in people to do production, administration work, and so forth. But right now, you're just facing that aspect of bringing in the first person, the first employee. Tell me how you're feeling, and tell me the thoughts that are going through your mind relative to that.
Well, thanks, Frank. I'm actually really excited about this conversation. After we spoke, I was able to listen to your earlier interview with Brian, and I'm excited to be able to connect this idea and this issue that I have with this concept of culture. So a quick recap of the issue that I'm facing is kind of like you said. I'm about a year into the business. I'm doing property management. The business has gone very well. I have about 20 properties now. I'm just at a point that it's relatively sustainable. I'm making money. I don't have any debt. Everything is going pretty well, but I'm starting to be overwhelmed. I'm taking time away from my family, taking time away from my hobbies, and the business has really started to become all-consuming. So I need to bring somebody on. But the issue that I'm facing and what we talked about, and the reason that I'm kind of questioning and needing some advice, is because bringing somebody on is going to take me from a place that I'm making good money and it's sustainable for me and my family, to a place where I'm going to come up short. There's going to be a financial shortfall as I bring someone on, with the intent to be able to grow with that at least one additional person, obviously more people in the future, but with that additional person to be able to grow to a place that is sustainable and beyond as I continue to grow my company. And I realize that there's going to be a gap. It may be a few months gap, it may be a year or 2 years gap, but trying to figure out how to navigate that, especially when it comes to finding the right person, so that I don't make a mistake and put all my eggs into the basket of this person who happens to fail or to struggle or to not be able to meet my needs. And then I have to go back to the drawing board and start all over again. So I'd love to hear your insight on that, Brian. And then a couple questions later, really curious about how to build a proper culture to be able to bring someone in that meets the values and demands of my particular business.
Brian, before you get started, I just have a quick question for Curtis, and then I'll turn it back over to you. When you say there's going to be a gap, Curtis, you mean that financial gap, that paying the salary of this employee is going to require you to pay yourself less money?
Exactly. And enough less that it's not going to be sustainable for me in the long
Personally.
term. And so I'm going to have to take a risk with this additional person and have some concerns on making sure that I bring on the right person that can rapidly grow with the business. And I can be back, to a place that's personally sustainable for me as right now, a solopreneur, but soon to be kind of expanding that.
So, Brian, what kind of suggestions can you give him as far as whether he's right to put so much pressure on himself regarding this first hire, or how he can find the right person? And there's a whole wide range of areas that I'm sure you could offer him advice on.
Sure. I mean, making your first hire is a huge leap, and it's scary, but it's also wonderful because it shows that your company is growing. And as an entrepreneur, you know that your work is never done, and that sometimes you do have to take a short-term step backwards financially to move forward long-term. But some things I would think about to mitigate that is I would kind of define, what does my ideal new hire look like? In other words, I might be asking, okay, I'm in the property management business. Is there anybody I know that has a book of business, where they could come and they could both help you and build your business, but maybe they've got accounts, maybe they've got enough experience where they could contribute right away by building the overall company, because they've got their own book and they've got their own relationships. The other thing I would ask on the complete flip side is, what kind of person do you need? I mean, there's people out there who, young people coming out of school that really need experience. And so you could also look at maybe mitigating your expenses by bringing somebody in, and part of what you're going to do is pay them salary. But part of what you're going to do is give them training and give them help them build a skill set in your field. So I kind of look at it on both ends. Is there somebody out there that could help me fuel the company because of their experience? Maybe they're working for a big company and they'd rather be with somebody like you in a more entrepreneurial setting. But if the skills demanded, are skills that you can train, as opposed to somebody that has to come in with this resume, I should be looking on the more junior end of the curve and saying, all right, I'll bring this person along, but I don't need to bring somebody in at a salary that's going to make me uncomfortable. You've got to, in my mind, if the company is the way you describe it, and by the way, congratulations. I mean, it's every entrepreneur's dream to get to this level. I think you've got to make the hire. It's just a matter of how can you mitigate your risk and not have that situation where you're carrying somebody, because I think carrying somebody to a loss for as you described, a couple of years is too long. And I would look for ways to mitigate that loss, and still, but still, leverage the company and grow the company.
Right.
I have a couple of questions, if I may. One is, how many more properties would you have to bring on once this person is hired in order to get you back to the same level of income you're personally making right now?
That's a great question. Realistically, it would probably be somewhere near 50. So I'm around 20 right now, at about 50, because with a single hire, in this line of work isn't exactly a single hire. It comes along with a lot of other contractors that need to be hired, and other, not employees, but other kind of contractors and subcontractors to be able to do some of the work. And so as the whole thing expands, there becomes more overhead kind of across the board. So I'd say I'd have to go from about 20 to about 50 properties in order to be able to bring that person on. And the reason I mentioned a couple of years is because at the current pace, I can probably be at 50 in about a year to a year and a half. Now, what I don't know is how much more exponential I can grow the business if I'm able to bring this person on. I would hope that it would be much faster than I can do it alone, but that part is kind of where the unknown is.
The other thing, and I think this is part of what I was hoping you could help us with, Brian, is he could hire a junior person at a low rate of salary, but the real question comes back to the culture, to that person, to their ethics, to their energy, to their, them being somebody he can count on to do a great job for him while he's making this personal financial sacrifice. He might hire cheap, but end up, being penny wise and pound foolish. How do you think, as far as looking for lower level income people, how can he do a better job of finding somebody who's got the right ethics and the right drive?
Well, let me start by asking a question. Curtis, is your ideal hire, is it somebody that's got the skill set, hits the ground running, maybe has their own book of business, or are you looking at somebody that you can train and bring along? Describe for me what the ideal looks like, and then I think I can answer that question.
Sure. So the ideal for me is definitely more the latter than the former. Mostly because if I bring somebody on that already has a portfolio of some kind or already has experience, for one, it's going to cost more, and for two, they're going to kind of want to call the shots. I'm a relatively new entrepreneur. I've only been doing this full time for 6 months. I was in the Air Force before that, and so for me right now, I'm really enjoying calling the shots. So I'd like to what I'd really like to do is bring somebody on that I can train, and really that complements the skill set that I have. So I've done a really I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm good at making deals. I'm good at finding new properties. I'm good at expanding the business, but I've struggled with the administrative side of things, the bookkeeping side of things, and I'd love to bring somebody on that could handle that, but would still be bought into the vision of where the company's going, and not just be, a data entry type person. So that's kind of the balance that I'm looking for.
Are you okay? But are you looking for somebody on the admin and the bookkeeping side, or are you looking for somebody to actually do the property management itself so you can go out and grow the business?
It's kind of a combination of the two. And honestly, I mean, if I could have both of those, I would love it. At the moment, I need the admin side more than anything else, because even the actual management of the properties I can do, but I would love to have somebody to do both so that I can just focus on growing the business. I feel like that's a third person and not a second person, but I could be wrong.
Well, all right. And now as you hire, your first hire and every hire you make after that will redefine your culture. Your culture, which is the convergence of having the right people and the right process working in harmony, changes every time you bring somebody new in. So starting the right way ensures that you're going to continue to do things the right way. I would kind of advise a couple things when you're interviewing a person. First of all, don't ask questions that can be answered with a yes or no. In other words, ask questions that begin with how, what, why.
Okay.
Ask questions about what, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I mean, people will kind of share what their vision are. And if they say, well, I don't know, then that tells you that's something that might be drifting. But somebody that might say, I see myself, being your second in command as we take this company and grow it. You've got somebody that's got the entrepreneurial mindset. But be careful you don't ask closed-end questions. The other thing I'd like you to consider is ask situational questions. So, for example, tell me the last time you disagreed with a coworker. How did you resolve it? What was the outcome? Because no matter how good of a person you hire, you're going to have disagreements. In fact, I think that's part of a healthy relationship, is to have those disagreements. So ask it right up front. Is conflict resolution, stress management. If they were ever placed in a situation where, for example, maybe they were asked to compromise their integrity, either overtly or covertly, how did they handle it? In other words, especially because you told me that you need somebody that can help you on the admin and help you so you can grow the business. You're going to be trusting them with finances. You're going to be trusting them with a lot of the business. So I would want to find the right fit. And you made it kind of clear that you're not looking for that seasoned veteran. You're willing to teach. So I think it's even more important to find somebody that shares your values. And again, your values are your values, right? It's not right, wrong, or indifferent. They are what they are. You need somebody that lines up with your values and for your vision as the company grows of the values of the company. The last thing you want to do is have a mismatch there, because nothing else matters if that's not lined up.
If you don't mind, let me ask a quick question in regards to that. So in reading through your bio, I saw that you bought Jetco. I don't know exactly what size it was when you purchased it. And being in the Air Force, I'm very, very familiar with kind of molding an already existing culture to fit something that is improved, trying to improve a culture that already exists. The quandary that I'm kind of facing, especially before I make this first hire, is what would be your advice as to how to create a culture that I am inviting somebody into? I mean, I can ask them all these questions and they can come in and then we can sort of just wing it and sort of figure it out together. But how would you advise for me to if it's not a pre-existing culture, how do I create a culture for that first person? I mean, it's if there's 10 employees, then it makes sense. You can kind of create a culture that makes sense. But for that first hire, how do you create a culture and invite them into it?
Well, you're already creating it, and you began to create it the day you opened for business, because people are doing business with you right now. And why would I do business with you over a lot of your competitors? Well, it's because you're doing something different. You're bringing something unique to the table.
Right, makes sense.
And the entrepreneur's challenge, and God knows I've faced this, is as you grow, how do you ensure that the company continues to do that, kind of to leverage and execute on your secret ingredient, and not lose it as you grow. So the right time to talk about it is right now when you make your first hire. I wouldn't, especially at this stage, I wouldn't get too fancy or too formal. But I would write down on a piece of paper before my first interview, here's who I am. Here's what I've done. Here are my personal values.
Yeah.
Here's my vision for the company, and share it. I mean, kind of share a one-page personal mission statement or personal/company mission statement to let me as the candidate know who you are, what you stand for, what are your values. I mean, coming from the military, and I love hiring people from the military because really, military is so process focused. That's what a lot of entrepreneurs like us sometimes miss, is we hire the right people, but we don't have the process. There's not a uniform way of doing things. And all of a sudden we wind up, it's like we're herding cats. So because you've got this background, you've got this opportunity to get it right the first time, use what you learned in the military, which is that nothing works without the right people and the right process. So, again, at the company size here, we don't need a big process manual. We need to go out and build the business. But to have a one-pager that lets a candidate know, and what that ought to do is it ought to lead to very, very rich discussion in the interview process. You'll be able to determine whether you're lined up or not.
Okay, that's good.
I'd like to ask a question also of you, Brian. I really appreciate what you're saying. He's got a culture going on right now. by the way that he does things, and it's evident in how many people have been attracted to do business with him. But relative to this position, and even though it sounds like this person's going to be head cook and bottle washer, this new person coming in, how important would you say it is to have a detailed job description that tells this hire what's expected of them and what success looks like?
Yeah, I would. I think it's critical because you may not find the person that's going to cover all of your bases. I mean, you may find somebody who's operationally good and can take the project management so that you can go grow the business, or you may find that admin. I mean, but to me, it would be hard to think I could find a good property manager who's also a bookkeeper.
Right.
And I mean, again, without knowing anything about your business, the thing you can buy bookkeepers fractionally. You can buy their time fractionally. So do you really need a full-time bookkeeper and a full-time admin, or is that something you hire out for a day a week, and you focus on the guts of the business? But no matter what you do, the job description, I'd like to call it a position profile. When I think of a job description, I think of here's the technical skills. The technical skills are X, Y, and Z, and that's important to spell out. But you also need to spell out, the key skills and key behaviors that are required. Is the person need to be customer centric? The key values that the person has to bring to the table, and also, even though I know it's early, what are the key performance measures? In other words, if I'm a new employee, whether I'm coming to you or I'm coming to a Fortune 100 company, I want to know, what am I going to be measured on? What's the criteria for me to understand that I'm doing a good job, that I've got a career here, I've got a career path here? So I would, in that job description / position profile, the technical functions of the job, got to have. The key performance, the key traits, the behavioral traits, the personal traits, got to have that. And then the performance measures. How am I as the owner and president of the company going to measure you, and what are the standards we're going to measure against? Because the earlier you can establish those standards, the more you can get people to behave and execute along those measures. The biggest problem I see is you hire a good employee and you give them no guidance. They have no idea what's really expected of me. And then we get frustrated because they're not doing what we expect. But how can you hold them accountable if you never told them?
Right.
That's exactly the kind of thing I was thinking about. It's really clear, really important to make clear to this person, Curtis, what's expected of them and how they're going to be evaluated in terms of how well they matched up with those expectations. Another question I'd like to put to you, Brian, is how about, even though this is, he's at this nascent level of development of his company, can you give him any advice relative to onboarding this person and getting them from being a complete outsider to the business to being an integral part of the business as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I mean, don't assume that because a person has the technical skills and did the same job across the street, don't assume that means they know how to do it your way.
Right.
So what I tend to do, and this is just kind of my personal approach, because I tend to manage new hires that report to me very closely, and then gradually back off. So we may have daily meetings, or maybe a morning check-in, an afternoon check-in, because you got to think about orientation and integration as two different things. Now, I know this may not be quite applicable to your company, but as you grow, it will be. Orientation to me is, most companies get it right, or they get it sort of right. It's that 1 day, 2 day program, maybe that week-long program that brings the company in and brings the employee in. That pales compared to integration. Integration can take 6 months or a year. That's how you really get the employee into your culture, into your DNA. Now, you probably don't have to worry about that as much because it's going to be just you and this new hire for a while. So
Right.
I would be focusing on building that relationship with him or her, getting to know that new hire as a person, as a human being first, and then as an employee. Get to know what makes them tick. And you've got that luxury. And quite frankly, it's a luxury that the more you grow, the less you're going to have other than with your direct reports. So I would start by building that personal bond. Now, look, I'm not saying you've got to be best friends. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is that, you've got to know something about the person individually, so you kind of know what makes them tick, and then you've got to have professional relationship too. You have both of those. What I tend to do is I try to establish that early on, and then as I trust the person, and that's just subject, that's completely subjective. As I trust the person, I tend to back off and give them more and more room, and then I can go back and focus on, what I need to grow the business. So I really, it works for me. It works for me to manage closely and then back off as trust builds. And it works for me to get to know the employee as a human being first and an employee second. And that builds a bond that will pay off very well in the business.
That's great stuff, Brian. Is there anything else? I mean, we're running a little tight on time, and I appreciate the time you've shared with us, Brian. Is there anything else that we haven't asked you about that you think is a critical component for Curtis to keep in mind as he's hiring this first person?
I would just take it back to the beginning, and when Curtis talked about the concern about the new hire setting him back. I just want to tell you that those fears and those concerns never go away. I mean, my company has grown. Trust me, I have those fears every day when we make a move, and you may not always get it right. And I know it's kind of commonplace when you tell an entrepreneur, don't be afraid to fail. And to me, it's you gotta ready, aim, fire, and if it doesn't work, remember you're not signing a lifelong contract with this person. So
right.
you give yourself room. You got to take the risk. I think people think entrepreneurs like us are, kind of these blind risk takers. Actually, maybe some are. I'm not. I mean, they're calculated risks. But what's your downside? The way I kind of manage my own fears is what's my downside? If I'm making a long-term capital decision and it blows up, I've got a downside. I've got this piece of capital around my neck. On the other hand, if I'm doing what you're doing, which is making a hire, and it doesn't work out, look, it's never fun to let somebody go, okay? But your downside is you can cut your losses really fast and find a hire that works out better, or decide to not hire for a while and keep it a one-person show. I mean, with the success you're already having, I just don't see that happening. But just don't be afraid to jump in there. The other thing is never, when you hire somebody, and this took me a long time to learn. When I look at my strengths and weaknesses, I always focus on my weaknesses, and I always focus on, if I could do this better. But over time, I've learned to hire people that complement my weaknesses. They fill in the gap, so I can play to my strengths. So don't worry about all the things you're not good at. Worry about the things you are good at. In your case, it sounds like it's rainmaking, it's business development. And the more you can focus on that, the more you hire people to take care of exactly what you need to, which is the administrative side. But fear is natural, and it's something I live with every single day, and I think most entrepreneurs do. But just make sure you know your downside and make sure you have a plan B, but then hire people that will let you get that property base from 20 to 50, because I bet you can do it, but you need the people to compensate for the admin stuff so you can do it properly.
Right. That's good. That's good advice.
That's great stuff, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and experience with us.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Curtis, for allowing us to put you on the hot seat, young man.
Well, thank you both very much. I really appreciate just the time to be able to learn from two seasoned vets in the entrepreneurial space. It's a new process for me, but learning from you guys is invaluable. So thank you very much.
Thank you to Curtis Marshall, and thanks to Brian Fielkow. And thank you for listening.
We return you now to the leader of the free enterprise system, broadcasting from the capital of capitalism. Here is Frank Felker in Washington, D.C.